In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Good evening, friends, and welcome to the 16th episode of Crime and Punishment, a legal podcast about the law, not a political podcast about politics. This is the official podcast of the Invictus Law Firm, PA, a criminal defense law firm in Orlando, Florida. The website for which is at augustusinvictus.com. That is, of course, yours truly, the host of this podcast, and I'm here tonight with my trusty co-host, Tiger Jen. Tiger Jen and I want to encourage you to visit the newsletter so that you can subscribe to the newsletter. And in furtherance of this, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to paste that. There you go. So go to that newsletter there in the comment thread and sign up for the newsletter. Also in the description, we've got all of the social media, including YouTube, Periscope, DLive, and Twitch, to which we are simulcasting as we speak, and of course Twitter and Instagram and all those fun things. So speaking of that, we're hiring a social media manager here at the law firm. And friends, like you've seen in The Godfather, friends and money, oil and water, this is not a friendly job. This is an actual job, like where we have to have metrics and a resume, and I've managed website X, and we went from Y number of followers to Z number of followers, and we have these metrics for success, and these are my past projects, that sort of thing. So, serious inquiries only. And it reminds me that last week when I was talking about Caesar's Palace in Vegas and I was talking about all that money stuff, I decided I wanted to do a separate podcast, a totally separate podcast about business and entrepreneurship. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to set that up, and I'll let you all know when that's going to launch. But I think that'll be fun. I'm actually surrounded right now, though I'm joined with my trusty co-host, Tiger Jen. I'm surrounded by Jesus on my left side and Tony Robbins on my right in here right now in this room. Which is also funny because when you think about where I was in jail, I literally had a white guy named Dirty to my right and a black dude named Slim to my left. And now I've got Jesus to my left and Tony Robbins to my right. What a weird world this is. Celebrated my 10-year anniversary from law school last week. And if you've done your homework and gone to the newsletter that's in the comment thread, you will have seen that Twitter thread. You might have already seen it on Twitter and Facebook and all that. It's had a couple of thoughts on the past 10 years as a lawyer. Once you reach 10 years, you're no longer a young lawyer. You're like a real lawyer. So it's a big milestone for an attorney to reach 10 years. Subscribe to all social media. We already went over that. I promised in the run-up to this, in the description, the advertisement for tonight's show, that we were going to talk about the National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin. We were going to talk about murder on Indian territory, and most amazingly, I guess it was the most titillating, the most, what's the word I'm looking for here? The most attention-grabbing, the most, not salacious, but scandalous. The most scandalous. I said we were going to talk about the reopening of the James Fields case. And I hope I didn't oversell that. Obviously, we're not at the point where he's getting a new trial, but strange things are afoot at the Circle K, dude. I can't believe that this is happening in this timeline, in our lifetime, that somebody in the mainstream conservative news is actually looking at the James Fields case and saying, hold on a second. I don't think that was true. It looks like this kid was totally set up and railroaded. I can't believe we're seeing a conservative outlet say that. So I'm going to share that link with you when we get there. But first, Tiger, what do you want to go over first? We didn't really outline this show tonight. Kind of winging it.
No, we didn't. I have right in front of me our weekly Chauvin update, if you want to go over that.
Oh, let's do that. Is he at home yet? Just kidding. That's probably not funny. That's not nice. All right, so what's going on in his case?
Sentenced already.
What? I thought he was getting sentenced in like July.
Well, the judge already put out his order. They had a hearing regarding his sentencing and also the other officer's joint trial. This was not televised. The judge said he wanted a break from that. And
now he wants a break from that.
Yeah.
Now that the man's life is over, he wants a break from that.
Yeah. So he said the aggravating factors were found. The list that I have is that the aggravating factors were that children were present, George Floyd was treated cruelly, and Chauvin abused his authority. So we don't have the actual sentence yet. How many years he's going to serve.
That's what I was going to ask. What was the order exactly? It couldn't have been the sentencing order because they would have sentenced him to, prison. So what was the title of the order?
If I can find it in 2 seconds, let's see. No, I don't. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, well, that is sloppy newscasting on our part.
Up to the minute of this podcast.
All right, well, yeah, send it to me too. I'd like to see that. That's interesting, because that would be really fast if that was a sentencing order. I imagine they're doing a pre-sentencing investigation where they're. Yeah, plus they've still got the motion for new trial outstanding. He's still got to write the brief on that. He hasn't filed a brief yet, right?
Correct.
From what I've seen. Okay. So, still a long road to imposition of the sentence, whatever this order is.
Yes, but we got some other interesting news out of that hearing.
What's that?
So these other things came from the other officers, defending attorneys, who word is they are quite aggressive.
You mean the federal case?
No, this is for the other 3 officers that were involved in the George Floyd arrest.
Okay, so this is not the. Okay, I see what you're saying. I got you.
Yeah. So they are bringing up some.
Is this the motion for
sanctions?
Yeah. All right. We're on the same page.
For prosecutor misconduct stemming from witness coercion. And what I have on that is about. So the guy that ran the autopsy, the actual chief coroner, I believe he was the only guy to have done an autopsy on George Floyd. He witnessed for the prosecution. And as people might remember, if they were following all the buzz, the first autopsy report said there was no asphyxiation, no signs of strangulation, none of that. What this motion is saying that came out is that a Dr. Mitchell called Dr. Baker and told him, oh no, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the guy that says that George Floyd was not strangled or anything. And if you do want to be that guy, I'm going to publish an op-ed in the New York Times talking about what a scummy doctor you are and how fraudulent you are.
The prosecutor said that?
No, this was a doctor who the defendants writing this motion, they're connecting with the prosecutor's office. I'm not entirely sure how, but they're finding a link there. Maybe if I got a chance to read the whole thing, I would know how they're linking them. But it, off of what I'm seeing, they're linking him with the prosecutors somehow. I don't know. So the exact words here in the motion are, in this conversation, Mitchell said, "You don't want to be the medical examiner who tells everyone they didn't see what they saw. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room and be wrong." He said there was a way to articulate the cause and manner of death that ensures you are telling the truth about what you are observing, and via all the investigation, Mitchell said neck compression has to be in the diagnosis. And so after that, then the Hennepin County medical examiner, he then issues the new final autopsy saying that there's neck compression. And all right, here they are. So they say the following prosecutors were present during this: Lola Velazquez Aguila, Joshua Larson, Matthew Frank, Aaron Eldridge, who we saw at the trial, and Corey Gordon. Paralegal Dion Dodd was also present. If this interview was recorded, the audio has not been yet disclosed to the defense. Dr. Mitchell told the state that a friend of his had posted the op-ed on Facebook. The state memorialized that Dr. Mitchell was going to send them the op-ed. So that's what happened there. Apparently, they got information that Dr. Baker was threatened about all of this, and thereby released his new improved autopsy finding asphyxiation and strangulation. The motion then goes on to say that this same Dr. Mitchell, he was the guy who was writing to the medical board in Maryland against defense witness Dr. Fowler, who testified about how, the medical evidence shows that George Floyd was not strangled to death. And when Dr. Mitchell, what he did when he wrote to the medical board, this is the guy that was saying, Dr. Fowler, these people died under him, and he's done all this shady stuff, and pray well one against him. So then the motion goes on to say that this has been destroying their ability to gain medical witnesses. So there you have it.
So their argument is that Dr. Mitchell, who is not with the prosecutor's office, Dr. Mitchell is just a former Washington, D.C. medical examiner. He browbeat the defense doctor into giving a different testimony, and the state knew about it. The prosecutors knew about this and did not report him.
Yeah.
They did not report Dr. Mitchell to the pertinent medical boards for his behavior and potential criminal activity. Interesting. So that's basically akin to not providing exculpatory evidence to defense.
Right. And just good old-fashioned witness intimidation.
Well, yeah, that's going to be an uphill argument, I think. I mean, witness intimidation by Dr. Mitchell, it's going to be difficult to say that the prosecutors were involved in it. Their strongest argument is that the prosecutors didn't report it when they knew about it. But how often do you see prosecutors' offices charging witness intimidation against prosecutorial witnesses? You know, if a prosecutor's witness is the one doing the witness intimidation, they're never going to get charged. Just like if the prosecutor's witness perjures herself, obviously she's never going to be charged, right?
Right.
So Dr. Mitchell, I'm sure he'll live to con another day.
Yeah. The other news that came out of that hearing was that change of venue was denied again. So surprise there. That was a big surprise. The same judge repeatedly denied change of venue.
I'm shocked.
Yes.
Yeah, because at a certain point, a judge has dug his heels in so far, he's dug his trench so deep that he ain't moving. If he were to grant a change of venue now, it would be an admission that he screwed up earlier in the case. So,
and that goes to, what do you think? Because he has to hear about the mistrial, I mean, how do you think that's going to go? I mean, it's he would be admitting to a mistake, wouldn't he?
Yes, he would.
Yeah.
So that's why I think if I had to make a prediction, I would say he's going to blame it on the prosecutor if he can. Because I don't think you can possibly say that Chauvin doesn't get a new trial after what the jurors did. And that, that's all over the news. He can't possibly say that Chauvin is not entitled to a new trial. The question is, how is he going to do it? And I don't think he's going to throw himself under the bus. Probably going to throw the prosecutor under the bus, or the juror, somebody, anybody but the judge.
Yeah.
Judges never, ever are at fault. They would never do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I'm not going to use names here, but let me tell you a short story. The day that I realized that I was a real lawyer, now that we're talking about this 10-year milestone thing, one day I had this case, and this girl, she's a dear friend of mine now, my client, former client. Now she's just my friend. I had this case, and the judge didn't understand something that was procedural, right? It was just a certain point that she did not understand. And I'm the one talking, right? We are going back and forth here, the judge and I. And she asks the prosecutor what the procedure is. And I'm just like, what? First of all, I'm right here. We're in the middle of a conversation. Why can I not answer that question? It's because judges routinely rely on the state, at least in criminal. This was a criminal case, obviously. In those situations, judges often rely on the state attorneys. A lot of them are former state attorneys. In this particular situation, though, this was such an obvious one, such a gimme, there is no question here what the procedure is, that I realized that judges are just attorneys wearing robes. That was the day. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. This was years ago. So there comes a day when you realize that you really are on par with everybody else, and then there comes a day when you realize that you are actually a better attorney than everybody else, and then things start getting really bad. Kind of like when I was in the 8th grade and found out I was smarter than my teachers. That was a bad day. And I was punished severely for that. So anyway, we have another case in tandem with all this. I just, right before we went on the show, so I didn't send this to you yet, Tiger, but I'm going to send it to you right now. I saw it on Instagram. It's an attorney in Georgia, actually, who posted this right before we went live. Ex-prosecutor disbarred after wrongful convictions in Texas. So we talked about this actually in Georgia, I'm pretty sure, wasn't it? This case, the article where we were talking about the bar saying that now you can be disbarred for withholding exculpatory evidence. That was Georgia. Okay.
Yes.
So ironically, it was a Georgia attorney that I saw this article from, but this is in Texas. This former prosecutor was disbarred after wrongful convictions in Texas because he was withholding exculpatory evidence. A former Dallas County prosecutor has surrendered his law license after the State Bar of Texas said he withheld evidence that led to the wrongful convictions of 2 men who spent 14 years in prison in the fatal stabbing of a pastor. Dallas Morning News reports that Richard E. Rick Jackson surrendered his law license last month. The State Bar concluded that he failed to inform Dennis Allen and Stanley Mosey's defense attorneys about evidence that could have cleared them at their capital murder trials in 2000. Quote, "This case is not about someone disbarred for making a mistake, or a prosecutor who accidentally or even sloppily failed to turn over favorable evidence," Nina Morrison, a lawyer with the Innocence Project in New York who worked to clear Allen and Mosey, told the newspaper. "This is someone who repeatedly and intentionally hid favorable evidence from 2 defendants who were on trial for their lives," end quote. And this is systematic. You've heard of the Innocence Project. Yeah, we've talked about the Innocence Project, Tiger. Yeah. So everybody in the audience, I know you're on a computer because you're listening to this. So stop what you're doing and go Google, or better yet, DuckDuckGo, the Innocence Project, because the stories that come out of the Innocence Project are just astounding, amazing. Yeah. One of them is Brian Banks, which I think I've told you all before. They made a movie about that. And this is just prosecution 101, hiding exculpatory evidence, allowing people to get up there and lie. They know that it is false testimony, and they allow people to get up there and lie. Things that just baffle you as to how these people keep their bar licenses. Thank God that this has gone the way it has. 14 years in prison because this guy hid information. Turned out they were innocent the whole time. Let me tell you on a personal note before we go to the next article. When I was arrested, they were throwing 65 years in prison at me. A month later, they were offering me probation on a misdemeanor charge. That's how fast that fell apart. And now I'm looking at time served. Time served is when you offer somebody something to get rid of it because you know you don't have a case. So I feel perfectly comfortable talking about that one because I told them to go fly a kite, obviously. But this is prosecution 101. You put people up there you know full well are lying. You gamble with people's lives. You don't take responsibility for what you screwed up. It's disgusting. People like that should be disbarred. So thank God for the Texas bar. Thank God for these guys. And thank God for the Innocence Project. We were talking about the Chauvin case. We went through all those updates already?
Yep.
All right. So you sent over an article about Biden. Biden broadens the push to put more public defenders on the appellate court. What's that about?
So, for me, the article is paywalled, so I can't read all of it, and I don't care too much, but I think one of the important things about this is that typically whenever judges are being elected or appointed, there's a favor towards putting prosecutors as judges. Now, at least typically where I'm located, I typically see the judges both having a career as both prosecutor and a defense attorney, but typically they favor prosecutors, and especially on these federal appointments, they would often put prosecutors. And one of the vain hopes that I had about the Biden administration is that Biden himself worked in public defender's office for like a real short amount of time during his short legal career. And so I always thought maybe if anything good will come out of it, maybe we would get the criminal justice system tilted a bit more towards the defense, take away a bit more power away from the prosecution, because we got somebody in office who has some idea of how this goes. And to me, this is some good news. I mean, I don't know a thing about the judges. I'm sure they're probably political appointments, but I mean, hey, if there's some people who, public defenders, they see everything, and they get a huge caseload, and so they're often very zealous in criminal defense. Typically, they are leftists, and leftists, they don't, by tradition, they don't like police, they don't like jail, essentially they have this mentality that nobody should be punished. But
well, some people should be punished.
Yes.
The people they don't like.
I'm talking about like the overall leftist mentality. But and so plenty of them go into criminal defense and public defenders, and things like that, trying to get people off because they essentially believe, oh, everything the police do is wrong, nobody should be in jail, nobody should be in prison, and things like that. So, I mean, I don't know if you know, there's an abolish prisons movement going on. I once sat in on a meeting about that, and I flat out asked them, like, oh, hey, I totally agree. I do think that prison is a failed system. Really few people should go into it, if any. But what would you replace it with? And she said, oh, I don't know.
Oh, that's forward thinking. Good.
I mean,
Very
I at
strategic.
least could articulate what I would replace the prison system with.
Trial by
But
combat.
yes,
Obviously.
that'd be
Gladiator
great.
games. What else would you replace it with? You can't let murderers just walk the streets. Obviously, you got to do something with them, but
Exactly.
why not
Yes.
let them regain their honor as gladiators? Have you ever seen Rome, the HBO series?
No, of course not. I never had HBO.
Come
I never.
on, man. You don't need HBO. You just need
That is
Voodoo
true.
or the internet. And it's all over. It was from like 2000. It's 20 years old. I mean, it's out there, man. You can find it. It's only two seasons, and it's the greatest drama ever made. The first season's about Julius Caesar, and the second is about Octavian. And long story short, there's an episode in there concerning gladiators that's just really good, but I won't spoil it. But
Sure, because I'll probably look it up based on the recommendation. I need things to watch.
you should. Well, I've got plenty of things. Trust me. My friends marvel at how well I can keep up with pop culture, despite my schedule. So we are at half hour, and I have not even looked at the comments. So Cyberpunk. The intro and outro is no DMCA. We kept getting strikes. We're going to do super chats and a store and all this marketing stuff on this podcast and on the Business and Entrepreneurship podcast. So I wanted to do no copyright music, and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio is incredible. So Poison Tooth is the name of that song, and I dig it. Seamus says, Hail Invictus. Hail, Seamus. Oh, you're from Texas, tuning in from Texas. What are you doing out there, man? That Texas story was for you tonight then. How about that? Florida Treasure, my favorite constitutional attorney. I'm gonna assume that was for Tiger. Good evening, Kiva. Hello, Apollo. Psyche. And of course, my sons are in the chat. What's up, young men? Oh, right. That reminds me. Do not associate with loose women. We are going to read a deadly serious article about that tonight. You know what? We're doing that next, as soon as I'm done reading the chat here.
All right.
Well, of course, you're probably normally a warrior, and now you got that drive focused fully on law. Indeed. So, hope everybody's doing all right tonight. Even as a lawyer, Augustus got that treatment. They won't let you out of jail, then they cave if you don't break. So, this is something I told my dad when I was first arrested. My dad, as you know, is a criminal defense attorney. I grew up with him, just putting me on the path to being a criminal defense attorney. I did everything I could to not be a criminal defense attorney, including dropping out of college, joining a metal band, getting a lot of visible tattoos so that I can never wear short sleeves again. In Florida, that one really came back to bite me. But I told my dad this when I was arrested. I said, they will not let me out. They will deny me bond. And he said, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. You have a right to bond. Ha! Welcome to America, amigo. You do not have a right to bond if you are a right-wing activist. That is a fact. I tried to explain to him, all of my clients are denied bond. Every single one of them, without fail. Whether I'm the attorney of record or not, it has nothing to do with who their infamous attorney is. It has to do with their political ideology. Every single time they're denied bond. It's not an accident. It is a strategy. And I have a friend, we'll say an associate, who he also has what they call associates. And these associates say that this is actually the strategy that they use and have always used with the mafia. You just keep them in there, no bond, no hope for a court date. You just keep them on ice. Just keep them off the street at all costs, whatever you can do. Hold them, doesn't matter what the charges are, just keep them there without bond. Eventually they'll take a plea. This is the strategy. In the case of these activists, the strategy was throw them in isolation. Again, every client, everyone arrested that was a political prisoner, everybody goes to maximum security isolation without fail, and they are all denied bond. It's not an accident that this happens in California, South Carolina, Virginia, Connecticut, New York. Everywhere that this happens, it can't possibly be unconnected. So yes, even I got that treatment, Mr. Sullivan. Trial by combat. I'm glad we have some takers on that one. Let's get rid of prisons. So that's going to be our first t-shirt, Tiger.
Trial by combat and bring dueling back.
Oh, yes. That will be our second t-shirt. Bring back dueling. Legalize dueling. Yeah, abolish prisons, bring back trial by combat, and also legalize dueling. Oh, The Invincible. Speaking of pop culture and show recommendations, my son is recommending Invincible to you.
Awesome.
It's on Amazon Prime. We watched it this weekend, the boys and I. It was pretty awesome. I hated it at first, and you will too. Trust me, you will hate it. But by the end, it's actually amazing.
Is this an animation?
Yes,
I'm trying
it is.
to look it up now.
Yeah,
okay.
It's an animated show. All right, so where are we at? Oh, I talked about do not associate with loose women or prostitutes. And this is why. Politico, well, everybody, but Politico is the only one that I can stomach reading right now. But every left-wing rag in America has picked this up. Gaetz associate pleads guilty to 6 federal crimes, including sex trafficking a teen. As part of a deal, this is the subtitle, as part of his deal with federal prosecutors, Joel Greenberg has also agreed to cooperate fully with authorities. 86 pages, this plea agreement. I've seen some long plea agreements in federal court, but I've never seen an 86-page plea agreement. Maybe that's because I'm a lowly 10-year attorney, but that is a long plea agreement if you ask me. And as Politico points out, oh, this is Mark Caputo. That guy. Also wrote hit pieces on me. This is out of Orlando, Florida. A former friend and ally of Representative Matt Gaetz formally pleaded guilty Monday to multiple federal charges, including sex trafficking a minor, ID theft, stalking and fraud, bringing his broad crime spree to an end and officially marking a new chapter in the investigation of the embattled congressman. That is Congressman Gaetz, who is the real target of this. Obviously, Matt Gaetz is the target of this. And Joel Greenberg is the associate, whom they have now turned against Congressman Gaetz. Full disclosure, I don't give a whit about Matt Gaetz. I don't know him. Never in my life had a communication with him. I don't know. Apparently he's from the same neighborhood as me. I don't know. I don't know him. We didn't grow up together. I have no dog in this fight. But I will tell you, this is obviously a political hit, as anybody outside of this can see. This is what prosecutors do all the time. This is government tactics 101, right? We've talked about the strategy of denying bond and putting people in isolation for months on end, forcing them to plea. We've talked about a lot of prosecutorial tactics. The withholding of evidence, that's an absolutely illegal one, but they do that all the time. Putting people up there that they know are perjuring themselves, they do that all the time. Filing false statements from other people so that they can have plausible deniability, they do that all the time. But this is another one where they will go for the weak link. And actually, I was thinking about this earlier today. Before I even saw this article, I was thinking about this. For whatever reason, I was thinking about business expenses. I was thinking about finance stuff concerning the law firm. And it reminded me of a client that I had. And I will not give many details because it's a recognizable case. But the government, I went to D.C. for this, right? This was that important. And it was a Washington, D.C. case. And I went in there, sat down with the government agents, and they had this guy dead to rights. They said, well, he was paid by this company, and then it was a company-to-company payment, right? It wasn't like he was an employee or something. It was his company got paid by another company, and they said he was paid, and then he went to Chick-fil-A. And that was like, oh, case closed. I guess we can close the file on that one. Let's move on, gentlemen. You got me.
Instant chicken, can't have it.
No, can't have that. Well, their argument was that this was a personal expenditure. Like, you know, it was a major contract, serious stuff. I mean, I really wish I could give details, but it's identifiable if I do. Major contract, we're talking lots of money, and he went and bought Chick-fil-A. They thought that was indicative of personal expenditure. I'm immediately like, so? And, like, I know you guys are government employees, but you do realize that, like, this is a business expense, right? Like, you take someone out to dinner, whether it's Chick-fil-A or it doesn't matter where it is. I could take you to 7-Eleven and buy you a hot dog. If you are my client, or if I'm trying to make you my client, I bought you a hot dog and some Skittles. That's a business expense, right? And if you don't like that, then talk to the CPA. But that wasn't really what they were going to close with. I would have, I could walk all over them with that one. Like, show me all the Subway and Chick-fil-A and Olive Garden receipts you got, buddy. We can defend that all day. But here's what he did. Smooth guy, smooth operator. Federal lawyers are a different caliber. And this guy was straight up Washington, D.C. federal lawyer. I mean, he was tops. And I genuinely respect this guy. But this is what he went with. Well, I haven't ruled out charging his wife too. So if your client doesn't want to take a plea, we can go to trial, sure. And you could win, sure, but I'm going to charge his wife. That is how they do it. That is how every government agent will come at you. That also, second Godfather reference of the night, Godfather 3, which most people don't include in the canon, but it's still okay if you're watching it on its own terms. But when they come for you, they'll come for what you love. That's what Michael said to Vincenzo. And that's what they do. So this guy, forcing my client into a plea because if he doesn't, they're going to take his wife too, happens all the time. And they will, whether they're going after them or not, I've talked about that on this show before, totally different case in a different state, and tried to get this guy to sign up to do undercover work for them. And the threat was, if you don't, I'm going to arrest your pregnant girlfriend. That one, to this day, that was, I don't know how many, 8 or 9 years ago that was. That was one of my first cases, and it still, to this day, drives me up the wall, man. But you see these movies where they will go and show a woman, her husband being unfaithful, right? They'll show her, it could be photoshopped. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe he really is having an affair. But they will go to that woman and they will convince her to testify against her husband. And I hate to tell you this, I hate to be the one to break the news, but that's not just the movies. That is how these people operate. So, prosecution 101, as I said, that is what is happening in this case right here. It is obvious that the feds are actually after Representative Gaetz. They have gone after Joel Greenberg, who had served as a locally elected tax collector in Central Florida's Seminole County. They're going after him, and now he is, quote-unquote, cooperating fully with federal authorities. So, this is something I try to explain to everybody who is in politics or political activism, whatever you want to call it. They don't come for you. They come for the people around you. Unless, of course, you are yourself corruptible. Obviously, a lot of people get jammed up because of drugs or sex or gambling or even the appearance of gambling in a certain case I know of. They will just straight up set you up. And if they can't set you up, they go after the people around you. So, to continue, Joel Greenberg had to resign his post last year after he was hit with the first of 3 indictments that eventually totaled 33 federal charges. But prosecutors agreed to pare those back in order to secure his cooperation. It's another prosecutorial tactic. Throw everything at them that you can. Doesn't matter if they're going to stick. That's besides the point. The point is terror. Everybody in this game knows that. People who are not state attorneys or criminal defense attorneys do not know that, however. So they are naturally terrified when they throw something at them that they obviously did not do. Things that have nothing to do with them. Things that the state knows that it can't prove. Things that the state knows didn't even happen. The uninitiate will see that and think, oh my God, my life is over. And that's the entire point of it, is to make you think, oh my God, my life is over. So that you will do something irrational out of fear. And you will take that plea because you want to get it over with. Because with 33 federal charges, I mean, I can't even calculate that, but I don't know what the charges were, but I know that the ones listed here are all felonies, right? Except maybe stalking. But all the ones we've read up here, they're all felonies, so 33 of those, even if half of those were felonies, I mean, he's looking at the rest of his life in prison. So obviously the point is terror. Don't fall for it. Gaetz has denied all wrongdoing ever since word leaked in March that federal investigators were looking into whether the Florida congressman had sex with a 17-year-old girl. Gaetz has not been charged with any crime. Joel Greenberg has now confessed to falsely accusing an innocent man of having sex with a minor, said Harlan Hill, a Gaetz spokesperson. The Republican lawmaker previously had said that it's Greenberg who has admitted to the crime, is trying to escape a lengthy prison sentence, and has also pleaded guilty to falsely accusing a political rival of being a pedophile. The tangled web we weave. And I do want to continue with this, because this is such an amazing case. Obviously, Greenberg is the bad guy here. There's no question about it. But the feds are using him to take down Matt Gaetz. And even Politico can't sweep that one under the rug. It's clear that that's what they're doing. The 84-page plea agreement, 84, I got 86 in my version of the plea agreement here, Greenberg formally signed off on in U.S. District Court, does not mention Gaetz or anyone else by name, but it states that the victim of the sex trafficking had sex with quote-unquote other men while she was 17. Aside from Gaetz, sources close to the investigation say prosecutors are also examining a former employee of Greenberg's in Seminole County office a co-conspirator of Greenberg's who allegedly was involved in defrauding a coronavirus relief fund and at least one associate of Gaetz's. The unindicted co-conspirator is mentioned, but not named, in one of the federal charging documents against Greenberg. But it's Gaetz who prosecutors with the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section are looking into. That's a telling sentence by Politico. Mark Caputo. You're welcome, by the way, Mark, for all this free publicity with all 400 to 500 views we will get for this episode. The division of the Justice Department is dedicated to prosecuting corrupt officials. Are they? The day that sentence becomes true, Mark, you let me know. David Oscar Marcus, a veteran federal defense attorney not connected to Greenberg's case, said that while it's clear from news reports that authorities are investigating whether Gaetz is involved in sex trafficking of a minor, the plea agreement has very few details about it, which he suspects is due to a lack of clear and irrefutable evidence from Greenberg directly implicating Gaetz in the crime. Gaetz, for example, is not mentioned by name in Greenberg's plea agreement. Also, while Greenberg appeared to get a break from prosecutors by only pleading to 6 of the 33 charges, he's still facing the mandatory minimum prison sentence of 12 years. Quote, he's looking at so much time because the only reason you would plead guilty to something like this is because A, you have absolutely no defense, or B, you're looking for the reduction in sentence of the century, end quote. That's the defense attorney, Mr. Marcus. Now, in federal cases, you can plead for variation or for downward departure. Who knows what that's going to be? The prosecutor and the defense have probably worked that out where there's going to be some range in there, or maybe they haven't. Maybe the defense and prosecution, all they agreed to was this is the schedule we're going with, and, it's all out war at the sentencing hearing, and we're going to ask for a downward departure, and, we're going to say that he's fully cooperating with the state. But I suspect that the state has agreed. The government. In federal cases, it's not the state, it's the government, technically. I suspect that this cooperating fully language that we keep hearing over and over, that means that they have agreed to some sort of downward departure, or at least they're not going to contest a downward departure or a deviation beneath what they usually would go for. So I think Mr. Marcus is right. Probably looking for the reduction in sentence of the century. I'm actually interested in seeing what he does get sentenced to. In any event, if there ever is any sort of trial against Gaetz, obviously the defense for Gaetz is going to say, well, didn't you get this sweet deal by turning on Gaetz and telling us whatever the government wants us to hear about Gaetz? Clearly that's what's going on. And a sign that Greenberg's cooperation is likely not enough to make a case against Gaetz, federal prosecutors are in talks for an immunity deal with his former girlfriend that seeks her cooperation. What did I just say? Just a few short paragraphs before. So federal prosecutors are talking to the former girlfriend in order to get her cooperation in setting up Gaetz. Amazing. They go for the people around you. Always remember that. She has not spoken personally to investigators, and her lawyer, Tim Jansen, has refused comment about what she would have to say, if anything, about any alleged crimes of the congressman. The victim's testimony would also be crucial, and one source familiar with the investigation previously said that she's 100% talking to prosecutors, but the nature of that testimony is unclear. What makes Greenberg's case so unusual is the scope of crimes he committed and pleaded guilty to, making him one of the most corrupt Florida politicians of all time. One of the most corrupt Florida politicians of all time. That is a statement, Mark. In all, there are 5 different categories of crimes Greenberg pleaded guilty to that are found in different sections of federal law. Sex trafficking a minor, stalking, identity theft, fraud of federal taxpayers, and ripping off local taxpayers in a cryptocurrency scheme. The plea agreement was, and then there's some fluff at the end here to go out on. So here we're coming to the moral point of this story that I was telling y'all via my lecture to my sons earlier. Do not cavort with loose women or prostitutes. Greenberg first met the sex trafficking victim. What a phrase. The sex trafficking victim. Just see how this fact pattern plays out and then call this girl a sex trafficking victim. Greenberg first met the sex trafficking victim on a website for sugar babies seeking sugar daddies, according to the plea agreement, confirming an earlier Politico report concerning the website Seeking Arrangement. According to the plea, Greenberg paid her explicitly for sex at least 7 times after meeting her on April 24, 2017. On September 4th of that year, Greenberg illegally accessed her driver's license records. Amazing how Mark starts that sentence, right? Mark doesn't start this by saying, actually, this girl was 17 years old, pretended she was 19, defrauded Seeking Arrangement so that she could get on there and defraud older guys. He doesn't start with that. He starts with, Greenberg illegally accessed her driver's license records. Is that really the problem? The problem is that he, as a public official, accessed her driver's license records after she told him she was underage? Because that's the rest of the sentence. Greenberg illegally accessed her driver's license records after she told him she was underage. What an amazing sentence. Mark really is a gifted writer, because that is just incredible propaganda. Greenberg's the bad guy here because he looked up her driver's license to confirm that, oh my God, this woman has done this. Three sources tell Politico that the victim, this is not in air quotes, it should be, that the victim had falsely advertised herself as 19 years old on the Seeking Arrangement website. Under the federal statute, a person who pays for sex with anyone under 18 cannot raise the defense that he believed she was of age, even if she produced a fake ID, according to attorneys familiar with the law. And we are familiar with the law, and that is accurate, as a matter of fact. That is strict liability. They have completely removed mens rea. Tiger, you are closer to law school than me. Why don't you explain the legal diction of that?
Okay, so there's a legislative rule for whenever you're writing up the sentencing of a law, whenever you're deciding what it should be. If you're going to make it a strict liability crime, that is reserved for crimes with low penalties, low costs. So, for example, many, if not all, traffic laws are strict liability. You ran past the light. It doesn't matter that you were escaping somebody. It doesn't matter that she was pregnant. It doesn't matter what. You ran the light. You pay the fine. They make it strict liability, namely because they don't want to go through a big trial, bring in a jury, things like that. Just, look, you did it. Pay the $20. We're done. That's what they want. That's what they're looking for. And conversely, okay, so I had to deal with that. Okay, so that's strict liability. It's for minor offenses. The reason why is because strict liability, what that is they remove the mens rea. And under law, there really should always be a mens rea, an intent. They need to prove that you did that not only that you did the crime, but also that you wanted to break the law. You wanted to do this. So there's a great quote from Blackstone. He writes, "As a vicious will without a vicious act is no civil crime, so, on the other hand, an unwarrantable act without a vicious will is no crime at all." So Blackstone is saying, if you committed a crime, but you did not mean to do it, it's not a crime. You didn't commit a crime. So we have this system where we have a strict liability crime that's a felony offense. You're put in jail. Maybe at one time you were even executed for doing it. But it does not matter if you are mistaken about what happened. It does not matter if you had no intent to do it. Compare that with, it is not a strict liability crime to kill a person. If you kill somebody, you have a right to a trial. You have a right. They have to prove that you actually wanted to kill that person. And not only that you wanted to kill a person, but there's different levels of intent for murder. You know, you got manslaughter, you got murder one, depending on what the state calls it and everything, negligent homicide. There's different types of murder, all depending on what your thought process was, what you were intending to do. But she tells you she's 18, she's 17, you're locked away for a few decades. Too bad.
We actually had a case about this in law school where a judge actually made the right call. And he's like, look, we made these laws to protect women, not to allow them to use this law to destroy men's lives. So he threw that case out. That was not in Florida.
I honestly believe that this was created to destroy men's lives. So when I was in law school, we actually had a little exercise that they did where they wanted us to write up an involuntary pornography law. There was one group, it was all women. They made it a strict liability offense and flat out said, yeah, we did that because we're women and we hate them doing this. So, I mean, that I could go into it, but it's not a political show, so I'll keep my mouth shut about why I think this exists, what it's supposed to be doing.
Well, ostensibly it exists because we wanted to protect young women from predatory older males. Turns out what it's actually used for is to destroy older males who are set upon by predatory younger women.
Yeah.
It's it's 1984. It's double speak.
It's a system where any teenage girl can throw any guy in prison for any time she wants. It really is.
Yes. And nobody, I don't know. Maybe they have. Maybe I'm just not up to speed on it. But I have never seen a serious constitutional challenge to this complete stripping away of mens rea on something this serious.
Yeah.
But speaking of politics, not that we're going to take a political side because we love Big Brother as much as anyone else. But isn't it the case that the same people saying, look at these predatory men going after these 17-year-old girls who are 6 months away from their 18th birthday or whatever, they should be put in prison for decades because this should be a strict liability crime. They shouldn't be allowed to touch them. We shouldn't have to even debate this. If it happened, execute them. Those are the same people that are arguing, well, pedophilia is just an orientation, isn't it? I mean, what's the big deal if, older guys are having sex with little boys? The same political persuasion. It's insanity. So, what was the that scientific Greek word you used that I have never seen before?
Ephebophilia. I might even be butchering the pronunciation.
What does that mean exactly?
Attraction to pubescent women. So 15 to 19 is typically the age range used for it.
All right. Well, I don't understand where that word came from, but whatever. All right. So, moral of the story, just don't. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. This keeps going on. Greenberg, who paid a total of $70,000 for sex with different women he met through the website, insisted they take the drug MDMA, blah, 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 blah. This is just, at this point, just character assassination by Mark. And really, I don't know whether this is true or not. I know that people take pleas to things they didn't do all the time. I know that indictments are often filled with things that are just absolute nonsense. I know that people put in police reports and arrest affidavits. I know from personal experience that people put things in affidavits that they absolutely did not fact check. And sometimes they put things in arrest affidavits they actually know to be false. So who knows whether any of this is actually true? Who knows whether he committed any of these crimes? But they came at him with 33 federal crimes, clearly mostly felonies, and he felt compelled to take the deal. Whether he did these things or not, I don't know. I'm agnostic about it. And I will correct myself for saying earlier, clearly Greenberg is the villain here, and they're going after Gaetz. Clearly they have gone after Greenberg. If these charges are true, he is the villain, but whatever way you want to cut it, he's not the real target here. Representative Gaetz is the real target here. And we have yet to see the unfolding of their full plan. Now here is an interesting one. He doesn't cite this, so maybe this is from the plea agreement or the arrest affidavit, I don't know. But it says, quote, the article says, after his arrest, Greenberg tried to get the victim to lie. Oh, this is the plea agreement, sorry. Quote, Greenberg contacted the minor directly and through one of the minor's friends for the purpose of asking the minor to lie and say that the reason why Greenberg looked the minor up in the driver's license system was because the minor had asked him to do that, which, as Greenberg knew, was not true. Greenberg also asked the minor for help in making sure that their stories would line up, because he knew that his commercial sex acts with her were illegal. End quote. The political rival, whom Greenberg falsely accused of being a pedophile, a teacher named Brian Boita, held a press conference before the plea hearing on the Orlando federal courthouse steps, where he thanked the federal government and an investigator with the local sheriff's department. But he faulted local prosecutors and state officials for not acting sooner to investigate and charge Greenberg for a host of other improprieties and crimes that became clear almost as soon as he assumed office in early 2017. So, Greenberg was accusing this guy of being a pedophile, falsely. And this happens all the time in politics. It's actually a miracle if you get in and out of politics without being accused of being a pedophile. That's the number one thing you get accused of, because everybody hates pedophiles. Like, it's universally agreed that pedophiles should die. Everybody can agree on that. So, you have a political opponent, you don't like that person, what do you accuse him of? You accuse him of fraud? Nobody cares about that. You're expected to do that in politics, right? You accuse him of, I don't know, being mean to his grandma? Everybody's, yelled at their grandma. You accuse him of murder? Well, you'd have to prove that one. I mean, that's a pretty heavy one. But pedophilia, now that one, you don't have to prove that. You don't have to prove anything. This is a court of public opinion. As long as you say that word, you smear that person with that word, it's over for them. From then on, it's going to be Warren What's-His-Face from New York, the pedophile. Roger Stone pulled that one.
Yep.
Everybody does that. It's the fashion, and it's so played out at this point that people are just like, at this point, desensitized to it, and that is itself a tragedy. Because you shouldn't be desensitized when somebody says, that person that you're voting for is a pedophile. That should be a serious accusation. At this point, nobody cares anymore, because everybody's accused of it and nobody believes anybody actually did it, except, of course, the people that hate the people that are accused of it, and then you believe anything. Like, you would believe, as many people do, that Hitler had a micropenis and one of his one testicle was fused to his thigh and he kicked prostitutes in his basement. Like, people will actually believe that because they hate Hitler. So if you hate somebody in politics, well, of course that guy's a pedophile. It's lost all meaning. Interestingly, If you call a politician a Nazi, that has a lot more power behind it. People would rather be smeared as a pedophile these days than as a Nazi. What a wild world we have come into.
Yeah.
What else we got, Tiger? Let's stop reading about these.
Well, before we move on, I can give your audience a quick little education in one of the ways that prosecutors will set somebody up on these charges, because I got an education in it. I was taught by some prosecutors who worked in the sex offender's office. So they showed us a case that they did where a guy posted on a dating site, or maybe Craigslist, I don't know, something along the lines of man, age, looking for a girl, her age doesn't matter. And like I said, menswear has been removed. So it doesn't matter what he meant by that. It doesn't matter. Feds saw it, well, state prosecutors saw it, and they go and have one of their agents pose as a teenage girl responding to this ad. And they took photos almost like the girl's just in a static position for the photograph, like it's a driver's license photo or something like that, full body, and say, oh yeah, this is me, when they exchange photographs. And the man who was caught on this, and he ended up exchanging lewd messages with the girl and was arrested. In his defense, he wrote down this defense where he was essentially spelling out everything that happened and saying, like, oh, I knew what was really going on, but I was just playing along or something like that. So all of us reading it, we got a good education what it looks like when prosecutors or police are trying to sting you on one of these things. So the girl sends this photograph, and all of her messages were like really late. All of her responses, like he would respond right away, as excited people do in these situations, but she would actually wait a few days. And anytime she sent photos, they were very static and boring, like nothing. Anyway, like he said, it should be a tip off, like this girl probably isn't who she says she is or something like that. But it's interesting to me
did
that
the cop or whatever say in these interactions that she was underage?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
and
then
that's how
screw him.
Yeah, that's how he gets that.
He made his bed.
Exactly.
He can lie in it. So if you think that you're going this, I've heard this before, as a matter of fact, this defense of, well, I knew what was going on, I was just playing along because whatever, because, I wanted to catch them. This is actually a cat and mouse game. I have actually heard that defense before, and it is absurd. If you think you are playing a cat and mouse game with the police, you need to just put down that meth pipe and just take a step back and think about what you are doing. You are not going to win that game. And no lawyer is going to put forward that as a defense. No lawyer, no matter how much you pay him, is going to say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is actually a genius. And he knows that these police are corrupt, and he was playing a cat and mouse game with them to trap them and show you how corrupt they really are. Nobody cares.
He just showed up to meet with her just to try and catch the police in the act.
And show that they were actually not a minor child. Yeah, what jury is going to be like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, oh, how dare they pretend to be an underage girl to catch a predator? Like, who's going to... Come on, man. Come on. Some people really... That's like clients who will say to me, well, they know it anymore. They did when I was younger, I guess, because I had my baby face, and they just thought I was, retarded or something. And they'd say, if I had cocaine on me, do you really think I would tell them to pat me down and search me? Come on. Yes, I really do think that, because you are stupid. Yes, that happens all the time, every day. Cops will say, you mind if I search you? No, absolutely not. I got nothing on me. And of course they do have something on them, and they think that they're going to play that cat and mouse game. Well, he planted it on me. I wouldn't have said search me if there was something on me. And don't get me wrong, cops do plant things all the time. It's not out of the ordinary. But don't just give them the whole kit and caboodle. Don't let them have it. You might as well just bend over a barrel and pull down your pants. Stand up for yourself, man. Stand up for your rights. Insist, no, I will not speak to you without an attorney. No, you are absolutely not searching me. You are not searching my car. You are not searching my bag. You are not searching my house. Go get a warrant. Those are magic words. And thank God everybody's wearing body cams now. If after those magic words, they search you anyway, or your bag or your car or your house, they do it anyway without a warrant after you have told them no, anything that they do find or that they plant on you, all of it will be thrown out. That is the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. If there is an illegal search, anything that results from that search is to be thrown out. So don't just let them have it. Say no. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. This great country of ours. We do have a couple more things going on. We've got the National Terrorism Advisory. We've got the... you sent over an article about murder in Oklahoma. So I was in jail when that whole thing happened, where Oklahoma is apparently not part of the United States anymore. What in God's name happened there?
Okay, so I actually enjoy this decision. It came in the midst of a crazy summer of Supreme Court decisions. Every single one that was coming out was big news. And this one got a lot of people just all worked up. And just about everybody misunderstands it, what it actually is. So, So first about the decision, then the news that resulted from this. What happened was there was a American Indian who he was another pedophile, I believe, actually, coincidentally, and I think he killed the girl. Just really wrong.
Oh, that's right.
Somehow or other, this gets appealed clear up to the United States Supreme Court, where they say that the charges that what he was charged with does not apply because he was on an Indian reservation and not Oklahoma. He was on an Indian land. And I believe this was brought up by American Indians purely for this purpose. They wanted the court to say that this part of Oklahoma is American Indian land. The court did not do that. What they did is spelled out right at the beginning of the opinion. Today we are asked whether the land these treaties promised remains an Indian reservation for purposes of federal criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. They are not. So anybody who's living there, they still have to obey municipal laws of whatever town they're in and Oklahoma law and everything. But when it comes to criminal law, they're now under federal jurisdiction. And so as a result of
criminal law, though, and not civil law? Why not the entire... why isn't everything under the jurisdiction of the federal government then? Was that specified in the treaty? That only criminal law?
It would have to do with these treaties and American Indian law and everything. I had a chance to learn American Indian law, but that didn't come to fruition. It would have been very interesting. But my understanding of that area of law, when I did study a little bit of it, is that it's all about these treaties. Everything is treaties. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the few areas of law where you have to know the history of everything that was going on. You gotta be up on your American Indian history and everything to really go through it. And so I like this decision, though. it was Justice Gorsuch that wrote it, because to me it showed that, at least in this moment when he was writing this, he had he had some balls. He was willing to make such a monumental decision like this that resulted in all of these cases in Oklahoma, tons of them just being overturned, retried, appealed, and everything.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't care because he just went by the letter of the law. He just that was it. And I love that. I would love to see that kind of guts more often from the Supreme Court, where they're just like, I don't care what the fallout is. The law says this. If it results in something crazy, so be it. And the little crazy thing that we got here, where is that article? What happened?
Oh, that...
Here it is. State laws don't apply, so feds charge 11 on Indian reservation with murder. That is what happens now in Oklahoma.
So 11 11 separate cases, or they're charging like a whole gang with one murder? Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, I'll find out in about 10 minutes, I guess, because my browser's being real slow here. So,
Okay, well, here we go. So Gunner Matthew Hemingway on a charge of murder, as well as using, carrying, and discharging a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. Gregory Gamblin on a charge of murder. These are all indictments, a long list of defendants, a series of separate indictments. Okay, so these are 11 separate cases where they've indicted 11 separate defendants on charges of murder. Okay. The charges came from a 3-day grand jury session assembled by the Justice Department's Organized Crime and Gang Section along with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Yeah, you'd be surprised. But apparently Oklahoma has a serious problem with gangs, especially in Oklahoma City. Apparently it's really, really bad out there. So this will give the feds a field day, won't it?
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. How about the
Honestly,
national...
I think that decision would have made me move out of Oklahoma, honestly.
Yeah, I don't want to be under federal rule, my God.
I'm surprised that I haven't heard of a mass exodus from Oklahoma. Probably because most people, they thought what happened was now like, oh, it's all Indian land and we're now under the Cherokee Nation or whoever's over there.
Well, you got to think, how many people ever move when there's a change of regime? You think of the French conquering Germany. Like, how many people were like, screw this, I'm moving to Poland? Or what about Florida? Florida has been under 5 different flags. Like, once the Union came and Confederacy was over, people were like, I'm moving out to Texas. I mean, some people did, actually. Maybe that's a bad example. But let's say when the English took over from the Spanish, right? Or from the French or whoever it was. Because there have been so many changes of hands here in Florida. Nobody was like, well, the French are here now. I guess we're moving out there to, Ohio. People are very much prone to just sitting around and saying, well, let's see what this new regime brings. As long as I get to keep my farm and raise my kids, whatever. It used to be people were not hypersensitive about politics. Maybe now people, but even now, like, come on. Look at all these states turning blue. How many people are mass exit? I mean, I personally know, several people who have moved to Idaho, especially from California, but really, most people are still in California. There's a lot of people moving, but there's a lot more people staying, despite it becoming a third world country. So we've got 2 left. We've got the National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin, and we've got the James Fields case. And I want to leave James Fields for last. We're going to leave the best for last. So this is from the Department of Homeland Security. They were, of course, most famous from the series The Punisher on Netflix. This is their National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin. That was a joke, by the way. Of course, they're most famous from 9/11, but The Punisher is an excellent series. Summary of terrorism threat to the U.S. homeland. The Secretary of Homeland Security has issued a new National Terrorism Advisory System bulletin regarding the current heightened threat environment across the United States. The Homeland, spoiler alert, now that people are not going to be confined to their homes, now that the election is over, and there's no fear that anyone is going to actually get mad about it or do anything about it, it's over now. Now that people are allowed out of their homes, there is now a heightened threat environment across the United States. The homeland is facing threats that have evolved significantly and become increasingly complex and volatile in 2021. These threats include those posed by domestic terrorists, individuals and groups engaged in grievance-based violence, and those inspired or influenced by foreign terrorists or other malign foreign influences. I love that phrase, grievance-based violence. I will give 10 points to the House that comes up with what was it that the British Crown called the American revolutionaries? Do we know what they called them? Was it just rebels? They had to have some cute term for them. I love grievance-based violence, though. That is incredible. Incredible. You are literally illegalizing having a motive. That's incredible. Like, we used to say violence is bad, okay, because you got courts. You have courts that you can take things to. You have law enforcement you can complain to. You've got lawyers who will enact justice on your behalf. You can file suit. You can petition the government. You can vote. You can do all of these things. That's why this is America. It's a great country, greatest country in the world, #1. But now that all of those things are out the window, now that you cannot petition your government, now that elections can be stolen in broad daylight, allegedly, I'm not making any political statements here. Now that you have no rights in court, you have been outlawed if you are part of the right wing. Now that you cannot file suits or have them judged in your favor. Now that the legal system does not apply to you, any violence that you enact is now grievance-based violence. It is automatically discounted as something wrong. Having a grievance is wrong. It's incredible. I mean, it's like somebody read 1984 and thought, this is a playbook. This could work. We could have total power if we just followed this insane dystopian novel. And what's brilliant is no one will see it coming because it's written like it's a bad idea, but we're going to act like it's a good idea, so no one will see it coming, and no one can stop us when we start changing the language. When we start saying, no, these words are no longer useful. Now we're going to use these words. Like, we're no longer going to use the term racial equality. We're now going to use the term racial equity. You're not allowed to use the word equality anymore, especially if you're white, because that's implicitly racist. Grievance-based violence is just one of those. It's one of those, let's just change the language a little, and we'll outlaw it that way, by just making it a bad thing implicitly, that people saying, well, my violence is because of a legitimate grievance. That's actually exactly what the founding fathers said. Well, now that's wrong too. You can't do that. This is a different country. Social media and online forums are increasingly exploited by these actors to influence and spread.
Uh-oh.
What's that?
Uh-oh. I mean, you can't have that. You can't have
social
people,
media? Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. You can't have people just saying whatever, saying naughty, racist things on the internet. You can't have that.
No. You have to get rid of those people because they are spreading violent extremist narratives on those platforms.
I know. You can't have bad words on the internet. You just can't.
Well, things are moving in the right direction, though. Because, as you know, I think you were the one that told me, the CEO of YouTube was given a free speech award for all of YouTube's efforts at promoting free speech. And this being a YouTube-based podcast, I sincerely support the CEO of YouTube, whatever her name is, and I applaud her efforts to promoting free speech, to engendering free speech on these platforms, while simultaneously banning everyone that Big Brother disagrees with. I think that's an amazing achievement. Man or woman. And thank God it's a woman. Because I would hate to be giving this compliment to a man.
And this is what they do in China. And as people know, I'm a fan of China. I like what China does. And this is what they do there, too. It's a good system. It's a good system.
It is. It is. I can't wait until we get social credit. Because I am going to go through the roof with my social credit. Such threats are also exacerbated by the impacts from the ongoing global pandemic. So there is a current heightened threat environment across the United States, in part because of the pandemic. I don't know what that means. You don't know what that means, but that's why they have additional details in here. Now, this bulletin, the duration of it is only from May 14th, which is last Friday, to August 13th, 2021. So certainly by August 13th, when all of this opens back up, we are going to have a way more heightened threat environment. Certainly, because then people will be like out in public again. Violent extremists may seek to exploit the easing of COVID-19 related restrictions across the United States to conduct attacks against a broader range of targets after previous public capacity limits reduced opportunities for lethal attacks. Well, that is true. I will grant them that. Confining everyone into their homes really did just obliterate the whole mass shooting phenomenon. Good for them. Really, all you have to do is turn the entire country into a soft prison, and then you get rid of mass shootings. Why ban guns when you can just imprison everybody? Historically, mass casualty domestic violence extremists, oh, that's an interesting term. Not domestic violence extremism, but domestic, as in homegrown, violent extremist attacks linked to racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists have targeted houses of worship and crowded commercial facilities or gatherings. Some RMVEs, that's their abbreviation for racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists. Thank God they have that acronym.
The government military love their acronyms.
Yeah.
RMVE.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiger. Because that's exactly what this is. This is military speak. For those who are uninitiated, this is the military writing this. Technically, it's the Department of Homeland Security, right? This is a civilian agency, a civilian department under the direction of the federal government. But really, this is military action being enacted on the United States and its citizens. And now they are using, in broad daylight, bold as brass, military acronyms and military speak in their bulletins. So thank you for pointing that out, Tiger. Through 2020 and into 2021, government facilities and personnel have been common targets of DVEs, that's domestic violent extremists, and opportunistic violent criminals are likely to exploit constitutionally protected freedom of speech activity linked to racial justice grievances and police use of force concerns, potentially targeting protesters.
They're using freedom of speech?
Yes.
Oh, no.
No. They're not using freedom of speech. They're exploiting constitutionally protected freedom of speech activity. So the way this is worded, it sounds like they're linking it to Black Lives Matter, because they're saying linked to racial justice grievances and police use of force concerns, right? That sounds like BLM. Potentially targeting protesters perceived to be ideological opponents. Now that's interesting. Targeting protesters. So now we don't know which side it's which, but what they're really saying is, whichever side, whatever, whether it's BLM or it's the white nationalist or it's anybody in between, they're all potential threats. Ideologically motivated. You know what? We still do have the James Fields thing. Ideologically motivated violent extremists fueled by perceived grievances, false narratives, and conspiracy theories continue to share information online with the intent to incite violence. Online narratives across sites known to be frequented by individuals who hold violent extremist ideologies have called for violence against elected officials, political representatives, government facilities, law enforcement, religious or commercial facilities, and perceived ideologically opposed individuals. The use of encrypted messaging by lone offenders. These are all bullet points, by the way. That's why it seems like it's all over the place. But this one by one, everything that they can complain of, they're going to. The use of encrypted messaging.
They're complain about encrypted messaging. The government and police hate encrypted messaging. They hate it.
Well, if you got nothing to hide, why do you got to encrypt it? Maybe because you people set people up on a daily basis along political lines and terrorize everybody. I don't care if I'm talking to, my friend about the shopping list because we need sausage and mozzarella. Like, I am putting it in encrypted messaging. You cannot trust any of these people anymore. The use of encrypted messaging by lone offenders and small violent extremist cells may obscure operational indicators that provide specific warning of a pending act of violence. Or they're super upset that they can't set you up for raiding, quote unquote, the Capitol. They're blaming it on encrypted messaging that they don't have any evidence that you were actually intending to, quote unquote, raid the Capitol. Now they're going to blame it on encrypted messaging, not on the fact that no evidence ever existed because this didn't happen, but it's, of course, encrypted messaging's problem. So, maybe we should just outlaw encrypted messages. Who knows what their solutions to these... Actually, why don't we get to that? Because we got to talk about James Fields. How we are responding. And my favorite section right after that, how you can help. How we are responding. DHS and the FBI continue to provide guidance to SLTT partners. Oh my God. These military acronyms. About the current threat environment. Specifically, DHS has issued numerous intelligence assessments to SLTT officials on the evolving threat. DHS is collaborating with industry partners to identify and respond to those individuals encouraging violence and attempting to radicalize others through spreading disinformation, conspiracy theories, and false narratives on social media and other online platforms. Let's pause the trolley there. So, there are individuals allegedly encouraging violence and attempting to radicalize others, either or, whatever, through spreading disinformation, conspiracy theories, and false narratives on social media and other online platforms. So what is the response by the Department of Homeland Security? They are collaborating with industry partners to identify those people and respond to those individuals. Who are those industry partners? I think it's pretty safe to say it's going to be Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, Google, all the usual suspects. Collaborating with the government, giving all of your private information to them, giving all of your messages to them. And this is something that cannot be overstated or overemphasized. Your messages on social media are absolutely not confidential. I tell people who message me on social media, if I get to them, I just refuse to read social media messages. But when I do, and somebody's trying to tell me about their case, I say, stop. Right there. Don't say another word. Email me about your case. Because whether this is technically attorney-client privileged or not, they're not going to care. You don't have an expectation of privacy when it comes to social media messages. So never talk about a legal case on social media, no matter what. They're not going to care about attorney-client privilege. They could get tied up in court, but whatever. Everybody's going to have it. It's basically public. So now they are collaborating, the federal government is collaborating with quote-unquote industry partners to get all of your information and all of your messages if they don't like your political speech. And this is in their own bulletin. This isn't a conspiracy theory. In fact, I'm going to share this in the comments right now so that you know that this is coming straight from the source. Anyway, speaking of the response to terrorism, DHS has prioritized combating DVE threats with its FEMA grants as a national priority area. Last bullet point, DHS remains committed to identifying and preventing domestic terrorism. How you can help. DHS asks the public to report suspicious activity and threats of violence, including online threats to local law enforcement, FBI field offices, or a local fusion center. There is literally a registered trademark at the end of this bulletin. If you see something, say something. They registered that. Report suspicious activity to local law enforcement or call 911. If you see something, say something was like Soviet Union style dystopia just a mere 20 years ago. After 9/11, that was everywhere. It's in all the subways in New York, every bus station in New York, and now all across the country. If you see something, say something. If you think your neighbor is up to something suspicious, you better turn him into the KGB. I mean, the FBI. What's the difference anymore? So, at long last, let's talk about James Fields. Unless, of course, Tiger, you got any more thoughts on this, whatever you call this, this bulletin?
Yeah, as it says, be prepared and stay informed. If you look at the bottom, maintain digital media literacy to recognize and build resilience to false and harmful narratives. There's a hyperlink there, and it goes to a PDF they have about media literacy and critical thinking online. So the government is telling you how to think. They're very helpful like that.
Well, thank God. That's why we have public schools.
Yes.
What would we do without them? I'm going to post that in the chat here so that you guys can learn how to think according to government standards. So, James Fields. I said in the run-up to this, when I posted the links, I said at the outset of the show that we're going to talk about the reopening of the James Fields case. That is not literal reopening as in there's been a motion for new trial filed, but apparently this is on appeal. And now, amazingly, the Gateway Pundit of all outlets in this universe, the Gateway Pundit is coming out saying, hold on a second, exclusive. Like this is breaking news to them. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to be negative or rain on their parade. Thank God Gateway Pundit has finally come around to, taking its head out of its shoes. But, how many years later? 3.5 years later, going on 4? I guess better late than never is what I'm trying to say. Exclusive. Never before seen drone footage from Charlottesville 2017 protests reveals enormous extent of media lies and propaganda. I never dreamed I would see the day that I would see a headline like that from the Gateway Pundit. God bless them.
And you know what? I think this is literally exclusive. It looks to me like this footage was sent directly to Gateway Pundit journalists.
Interesting.
So, I mean, there they go. They get this bombshell.
Good for them. Good for them. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm a hardliner and I'm thinking, as a criminal defense attorney, not as a political activist, but as a criminal defense attorney, where were you when all of the problems with James Fields were right in everybody's face and nobody wanted to talk about them? But better late than never. I mean, I don't know Ben Wetmore, who is the author of this. I don't know where he's been. I don't know. Maybe he took his red pill late. I don't know. But God bless him for publishing this. I'm actually late on.
James Fields only has 419 years to wait anyway, so.
That's true, plus life. So yeah, however long he lives, you've still got 4 centuries after that. So Eventually, someone will clear James Field's name. Never before seen drone footage from Charlottesville 2017 protests reveals extent of media lies. Bullet point. Shows there was almost no chance convicted driver James Fields knew that he was turning onto a street with extreme left-wing protesters as a gathering left-wing crowd waited while protesting through the whole city. Bullet point. Could be critical evidence in the pending appeal by James Fields of his double convictions in both state and federal courts, leaving the then 20-year-old with a life without probation sentence plus 419 years. Bullet point. Shows that the pro-Lee protesters... That is... I really can't believe I just read that. Pro-Lee protesters. What happened to all the white supremacist radicals that were there? Gateway Pundit. God, how about this? This is like Christmas Day. Shows that the pro-Lee protesters looking to protect a statue of Robert E. Lee from being taken down were literally pushed by Democrat police agents and funneled through a hostile crowd of left-wing agitators. That is exactly what happened. And it only took 3.5 years for it to come to light, even though it was on every live stream there that day. Bullet point. Shows militant Antifa, alternative left communists, outnumbered pro-Lee protesters by 10-1. Yet, media only covered the presence and violence of pro-Lee protesters. Left-wing violence was officially sanctioned by media, government, and police during the protest. Bullet point. Law enforcement never requested this footage. This full footage has never been seen before. As a matter of fact, I don't think I put the link in there. I put the link for showing you how to think like the government wants you to think, but here you go. Watch that video. It's an hour and a half long, so we're not going to do that here. I have old man bedtime hours, so I'm definitely not doing it. But you, at your convenience, dear listener, you can view this never-before-seen video from Charlottesville. An hour and 23 minutes and 21 seconds of drone footage. At 10:40, you can see left-wing extremists flying communist flags, celebrating the over 100 million who perished mercilessly under international communism and its many socialistic variants. And then it has the picture.
I want to say, like, that was a big reveal to me looking at this, because I don't know, I don't think I've ever seen any pictures or footage of people flying Soviet Russia flags.
I don't remember seeing that either. But I mean, there were a lot of people there. Every group, it was like the Warriors, you know? Every group in town showed up. And by town, I mean America. Everyone was there. So you couldn't possibly have seen all the flags. At 14:55, you can see a group of radical leftists, having attacked the pro-Lee protesters for most of the video, now form a human barricade across the street to prevent any other attendees from entering the park. Yeah, that happened. And that is not just the drone footage. That's footage all over the internet. At 17:15, you can see a pro-Lee group calling themselves the Highwaymen, who are dressed distinctly in yellow attire, prevented from walking up the street by the barricade, and you can see them try to snake their way through the hostile crowd. This crowd and arrangement is clearly set in place by the many police barricades, ensuring a clash between the two groups. So, I'm glad they're pointing that out. This is being covered in 100 different articles. Everybody who has actually researched what happened at Charlottesville and is actually put out in the Tim Heffy report. Charlottesville made the city of Charlottesville, that is, made the dire mistake of hiring an outside independent attorney to investigate what happened. They thought that he was going to clear them and say, well, it was all those evil white supremacists, because that's what all lawyers would do, right? This guy was a former U.S. attorney, definitely in the system guy, and blew everybody away by coming back and saying, no, it was your fault. It was Charlottesville's fault. It was the police. It was the fault of the police. The police screwed this up. They had a plan. They changed that plan, and then they refused to change it when you guys in Charlottesville screwed all these people over by pulling their permit illegally And when they won that fight in federal court, you just let it happen. And he even quoted the police chief saying, let it happen. So that was a grievous mistake on the part of Charlottesville, letting that happen. But this is all over, including the Heffy Report, a million articles written. Greg Conti wrote great articles about what happened there. And they all point out the cops didn't just let it happen, they set it up to happen. The entire thing was a setup. And now Gateway Pundit is coming around and pointing this out for us using drone footage. So God bless him. At 1825, anti-Lee protester Corey Long, black male, who is shirtless with a white t-shirt around his neck, violently launches projectiles into Lee Park, assaulting the pro-Lee participants. Long will later be found trying to set pro-Lee attendees on fire with an improvised flamethrower as they exit the park at the demand of the Charlottesville police. We are running out of time, so we're just going to go down here to 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 7 seconds. There, you can see there is a vehicle impact. This is the car allegedly driven by James Fields, impacting and resulting in the eventual death of Heather Heyer. This is 3 minutes after the protesting marchers arrive at the intersection and begin blocking it. Litigation from the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally has been going on for almost 4 years. Much of the litigation revolves around the death of Heather Heyer, a left-wing protester who was allegedly hit by a car driven by James Fields. Heyer, who was 4'11" and weighed 330 pounds, severed an artery as an internal injury after being impacted and died en route to the hospital. Nearly 35 others were injured in the car crash, 5 of whom were considered critical. And then he sums up what happened with the case, which we all know, but we will have to do a separate episode about just that case. But it points out that the drone footage shows that there was a mob there. What it might not point out, but that is being verified by everybody who was there. Every single person will tell you the same thing. The rally was dispersed by the police. They gave the dispersal order. Everybody went home. This car crash with James Fields happened long after everybody had already left. Everybody was gone. The rally was over. And yet, the Charlottesville police, who was, by the way, backed up by the Virginia State Police, DHS, FBI, everybody, they had tanks there. They allowed these people to just march all over, doing whatever they wanted the rest of the day. After they dispersed the pro-Lee rally, Unite the Right, they then allowed this mob to just completely take over the city. That is the environment in which this car crash happened. So I'm sure that will come out on the video too. Not sure to what degree though. So that's what's happening. It's on appeal. They're appealing both the state and the federal cases because he was charged with both. The U.S. attorney famously just totally grandstanded, charging him with just outrageous federal charges. And then when he's convicted in the state case, it's like, well, might as well. And they took the plea to the federal charges. So now both of those are being appealed, thank God. And let's see what we can do for him. So we are coming up to the end of the hour. Let's post this once more, the newsletter, because this is how we get the news out to you. So I meant to do that earlier today, as a matter of fact, as a test run, but we do this week in review every Friday. This is how we post all the news going on, how we repost Crime and Punishment, and this is where you will first hear of the upcoming business and entrepreneurship podcast that is coming. So sign up for the email list right there. Mostly peaceful flamethrowers. Yes, indeed. So that's all the news we got, unless you got any other articles there, Tiger.
I got a quick update because I like to typically, in the way the news works, is they like to show you some crime happened. That's the big news. But it's, I don't know, the arrests for whatever reason don't get spread around. So I know last week I mentioned about the people throwing a pig's head at a defensive witness's home.
The doctor.
Those people were found and charged. It was 3 women, and they believe there may be others involved that they're looking for now. So
really?
Yes.
No way. How about that? Pigs are flying. Just saw one outside my window. Maybe they'll charge that doctor after all. Not the one with the pig's head smeared all over his house, but the one who coerced the other doctor into changing his testimony.
Right.
The former medical examiner of Washington, D.C. Maybe they will charge him. Who knows, man? Crazy things are happening. James Field's case is reopening in the media.
And I just brought up the James Field's appeal because I was like, oh, did they have a brief out yet? It looks like they filed the notice for appeal in December 2019, and we still don't have an appellate brief or anything. I guess courts move slow. Yeah.
Well, yeah, everybody's blaming COVID for everything, but that's good.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, he's got life plus 419 years, so he's got all the time in the world. But more importantly, the further out it gets, the less mass hysteria there is. And the more judges will be able to say, let's think about it. Kind of like the Milligan case that I brought up previously on this program, where during the Civil War, everybody wanted this guy hanged by a military tribunal. But once the war was ended, the Supreme Court got a hold of it and they said, well, let's think about this rationally, okay? You guys tried him before a military tribunal in a state of war. He was a civilian. The civilian courts were open. What were you thinking? You can't do that. Whereas if they had decided the trial in wartime, he might well have been executed, and there would be no ex parte Milligan case. So possibly, all this time out, maybe James Fields actually could get a fair shake because the judges won't be so politically pressured by the mass hysteria, and maybe, inshallah, God willing, maybe even his lawyers will actually fight for him this time.
Yeah, because that's the way the courts are supposed to work, is they're supposed to be divorced from the world, the publicity, everything going on. The only thing that exists in the trial is the evidence in front of the jury. That's the way it's supposed to work. And I don't know. I hope it can keep working like that. I want it to be like that, where they don't care what's going on outside.
Well, we need young idealists like you, Tiger. All right, my man. Well,
the ideal, you fight for it. That's the idea.
Indeed. That's right. So everybody, stay in school, don't do drugs, keep fighting, go to law school, and help us out. Tiger, thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure, my man. And we will see you all next week. Good night, everybody.